Did she ask you about being?
Oh, is that the recording? Okay, I just didn't know what it was. I mean, I'm an alcoholic. Now, you know I got to rebut this, right? I got to have my rebuttal. So what really happened, no, it is all my fault. I did book this 3 months ago and didn't bother to look and see how long it actually took to get here until 2 days ago, at which point I'd already put in for work. It was a long story. It all worked out. We peeled in here on 2 wheels with, 4 minutes late, which is pretty impressive. I'm very impressed that we got here 4 minutes late. Hold on, I need to calm down for a second. I did say I'm an alcoholic, right? Okay. I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting us to come. It really is an honor to do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I always like to say that normally right before I get up here, I get kind of overcome by a wave of gratitude. And I love that because I love gratitude today. But I get overcome by a wave of gratitude because I think about how when I first got here, I wasn't being asked to come anywhere. You know, people had stopped inviting me to go places because either I wasn't going to show up, I was going to back out. You know, I never did what I said that I was going to do, and I dropped out of life is pretty much what I did, and I could really relate to that in the 12 and 12 when it talks about that in the 8th step that I just dropped out of life, and I could do that in sobriety if I'm not careful. You know, I still have those isms and those defects, so I have to be constantly vigilant to work this program so that I suit up and show up. And thank God for sponsorship and women in Alcoholics Anonymous who didn't let me get away with anything when I first got here, because that's where I learned that, you know, I show up no matter what, no matter how I feel or what I think or what I believe. I suit up and I show up. And every time I do that, if I walk through the fear or if I don't feel like going somewhere and I don't want to do something, every time I just show up, it's always way better than I could have thought. So I'm just really grateful to be here. Thank you again for inviting me. My sobriety date is January 16th of 2004, and I have a sponsor, and her name is Julie. And she's got a sponsor, and she has a sponsor, I hope. No, she does. And, you know, I come from a strong line of women who really believe in working the steps and applying the steps in our life, and inventory, of course. There's always the inventory all the time. But I'm grateful for that. I'm really grateful for that. And I have a home group. It's the Turning Point group of Alcoholics Anonymous. We meet on Wednesday nights at 6:30, and it's a women's meeting, so women, you can come if you want. When you're in Wilmington, we'd love to have you. It's a great little meeting. It's an intimate little group, and it's funny because when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I hated women's meetings because I really didn't like women too much. You know, there's always, you know, I always hear this a lot from other women is that, you know, I just didn't like women. There was always something that they had that I wanted, and, you know, it was always a competition, you know, it was always a competition with other women, and, you know, thank God it's not like that for me today. You know, I have these women relationships in my life that I just treasure, you know, I just absolutely treasure. And 2 of them rode in the car with me today, and we had the best time. And the coolest thing about riding in the car for 2.5 hours with 2 of your best girlfriends when you're coming to speak is that you don't think about anything about speaking. So my mind was completely off of this, and we just laughed, and it was just fantastic. And I didn't do those things when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I wasn't having that fun, and I wasn't laughing and joking, and I was driving like a maniac, but, you know, I still do that. Oh, and in my defense, well, maybe I shouldn't say that. Well, okay, so I really couldn't speed either. So there was a whole other aspect to this that I can't speed because I'm going to lose my license if I get another ticket. That's really bad, you know? And the realization of that came, like the turning point, if you will, was when I got the last ticket, and I realized, my God, you are sober. You've been sober for a little while now, and if you lose your license in sobriety, that is just, you just can't do that, you know? And then it came to like, who do you think you are? Really is what it ultimately came to, is who do I think that I am, that I don't have to observe the laws of man, you know? And I love that one of my best friends was close to a man who would ask her when she was driving like a maniac, if you can't obey the laws of man, how can you ever obey the law of God? And it's like, ooh, well, when you put it that way, you know. So let's see, I guess I'll just kind of tell you a little bit about what it was like and what happened, what got me to Alcoholics Anonymous, and why I stay and how I stay, because I can guarantee you it certainly isn't from any virtue on my part. I loved drinking. I loved alcohol. And I loved what alcohol did for me, and that's what I love about the Big Book and how I could relate when I came to AA is that I loved the effect produced by alcohol. I loved that it made me feel different. And I love anything that makes me feel different, If anything that makes me feel different, I want more and I want it now. And thank God Alcoholics Anonymous makes me feel different. If it didn't, I wouldn't have stayed, But that's what happened for me in Alcoholics Anonymous, that it made me feel better, and I always want to feel better. And if it didn't make me feel better, I'd be out there finding something that did. So my first drink was when I was 8. My Aunt Debbie, who's my favorite aunt to this day, she could be one of us, and we used to go over to her house on Saturday nights, and we being my mom and my sister and I have an older sister, and my mom and my dad, and my mom and my sister and I used to go over to my Aunt Debbie's house, and my aunt and my mom would listen to the oldies countdown. So this was in the 80s, so the oldies then was 50s and 60s, and so we'd go over there, and they'd sit in the kitchen and drink, and me and my sister would play. And I don't know at what point around 8 that one night I walked through the kitchen and Aunt Debbie held a Bud Light down underneath the table so I could grab it. And I smashed that thing up, and I drank it, and I loved beer. I liked the first taste of it. I liked everything about beer, my entire drinking. I liked everything. But I remember I got drunk that night, and I remember the room spinning, laying on the couch, and not really knowing what was going on, but thinking it was pretty cool. And I remember my sister making fun of me, and all of those things. And that's what I remember about my first drink was that, I felt like I was grown up. I was grown up because I was drinking with my aunt, and it was awesome. I just loved her. And, later on, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time, I thought that I had a resentment against my Aunt Debbie. When I first got sober, I had a resentment against her because I'm like, how in the world do you give your 8-year-old niece alcohol? How do you do that? And if she hadn't given me alcohol when I was 8 and 9 and 10, then I probably wouldn't be, and I had this blame game going on with her. And, thank God for sponsorship and the steps, which, going through that 4th step with a sponsor, I learned that my job is to try to seek compassion and understanding for those that I feel have harmed me. And in that process, what I realized was that, my aunt was getting dragged around to bars by my grandmother who's alcoholic when she was 6 and 7 years old with her younger brother. And, she grew up in an abusive home with my grandfather, and he left them when they were children. And, those are the things that I don't think about when I'm pointing the finger at somebody else who's hurt me or has wronged me and has made me the way that I am. I don't think about all that stuff, about what happened with them in their life. And thank God for the steps that I'm able to see that, I'm able to shift that perception around and see, that we're all hurting, we're all hurting, and we're all doing the best we can. And her pain was different than mine, but, and what I ultimately realized from that was that I am one drink away. I have a niece. I have an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old niece, and I am one drink away from being Aunt Debbie, I know for a fact that if I took a drink today, I would be the same as Aunt Debbie to my 11-year-old niece or my 13-year-old. So who am I to judge her, So I grew up... my parents got divorced when I was in 7th grade. In 9th grade, my dad moved to North Carolina, so it was just me and my mom. And my sister had graduated from high school at that point, and she had gone off to college. So it was just me and mom. And mom had to work hard to kind of pay the bills. She didn't have an education, and she has a mental illness that required her to be hospitalized on and off throughout my entire life, up until probably 5-6 years ago was her last time in an institution, and that was just for a brief period of time. But she had a hard time, she had to work a lot, but she's one of those nocturnal types that loves working the night shift, so she worked at a convenience store, the midnight shift, the graveyard shift at a convenience store, and that was perfect for a fledgling alcoholic. So I'm in high school at this time, I'm 9th grade, and my mom's gone all the time, so I start having parties at my house. I'm drinking all the time. I'm not going to school. I'm skipping school. I'm hanging out with the kids that were doing what I wanted to do. All through elementary school and up into high school, my grades were pretty good. I was always a pretty quick learner. I was pretty smart kid, but things started kind of, my priorities started to change a little bit. I didn't really care that much about school, and I loved drinking and partying, and it was perfect, so I could do that all the time. My mom wasn't around, and I didn't have a whole lot of supervision, and I loved that. And, that would be what ultimately, this lack of accountability in my life. I never had any accountability to anyone except myself. And so, 9th and 10th grade, I'm in high school, and I started getting a little bit of trouble. I'm sneaking out. I'm coming home drunk, and, mom's having to ride around town trying to find me because I don't show up at home. And, I often think about that, like, I don't have kids yet, hopefully I will. I just got married. But I don't have kids, but I don't know what it's like to have to go around looking for your child, and have to have waking up and your child's passed out in their room and having to throw them in the shower, wondering what in the heck they've been doing, what kind of drugs are they on, what kind of, what's going on with them. I don't know what that's like. So part of me staying sober is to make those amends, that's making those amends and trying to be a daughter to my mom because I was such a horrible daughter. So 9th, 10th grade, just partying a lot. Got to the point where mom was kind of like, I just can't really, I'm not home enough. Your dad's got a more stable house. I'm going to send you to live with him. I'm in 10th grade. I'd grown up with everybody that I went to school with, so I was devastated. I hated her. I hated moving. I had to move to a new school. I was terrified. And that's what I look back over my life and realize I was terrified all the time. If you'd asked me when I got sober if I was scared of really anything, if I had fear, I would say no, because I'd do anything and I'd try anything, and if I liked it, I'd do it again. I always thought that because I was whatever, that I'd do anything, or that I didn't think I had fear. But it turns out that I was terrified of everything. I was terrified of everything, and mostly I was terrified of people, and I was really terrified that people would get to know who I was and realize that there was nothing there. Because that was the thing. I had a lot of superficial relationships, but I never really had any intimate relationships. I didn't let anybody get to know me. And I was terrified that if you did get to know me, then you'd run away screaming. And if you did get to know me, you'd find out that, we were poor when I growing up. We lived in a trailer. My mom had a mental illness, and we were weird. And, I was terrified that people would know all of these things about me, and they wouldn't like me. And so I moved to this new school in 11th grade, and just being terrified. I remember I'd go to the bathroom at lunch and hide out, because I didn't know where to sit in lunch, and I was terrified to walk into that group of people and try to find a place to sit. And eventually things started. I ended up starting to make some friends, and my grades started getting better a little bit, and everything started picking up a little bit. So in 11th grade, I was 16. I got my first DUI, but it wasn't my fault. It was strictly circumstantial. If the guy that was in the truck with us, because I had 6 people crammed in the front cab of my dad's work truck, and I was late from curfew, and really all I was doing was looking down to see what time it was, to see how late I was, and I swerved a little bit. And and if the guy in the truck hadn't hated the cop and dated his ex-girlfriend, then there's all these things. Then he wouldn't give me a ticket. So that was my first DUI, but nobody knew. Nobody knew then. I was 16. We didn't think about that. I was just doing what everybody else did. I was doing what my parents had done. They told us plenty of stories about crazy antics in high school, and our family liked to drink and have fun. So that didn't slow me down. It was a little consequence, a little blip in the road, and I go off to college, graduated high school, went off to college, and was doing okay there for a couple of years, and that seems, that's my pattern. I can do okay for a little while, and then things start going downhill, and then somebody will call me out, or it'll get a little painful, and I'll pull myself back together, and things will start looking up again. Kind of like in Bill's story, where he keeps talking about how many, all the times that he would say, I'm really going to do it this time, and Lois's hopes would fare high, and everybody would, think that it was going to be different. And that's how it was for me. So I go to college and everything's okay, and then inevitably I'm an alcoholic. So I turn out to where I'm start drinking all day, every day. I start drinking all day and all night. I stopped going to class. I stopped going to work. And I had a good friend of mine, actually, that I had dated in high school, who we kept in touch, and for some reason I was honest with him about what I was doing, because I wasn't really honest with anybody about anything much, but I was honest with him about the fact that I'd stopped going to class and I'd stopped going to work, and that really I was just drinking all the time, and he called my dad, and my dad came and got me and was like, I'm not paying for you to be in school anymore. If you're not going to go to class and go to work, then you're out of there. And you can either come live with me or you can go live with your sister, who my sister was living in Virginia, which is where I'm originally from. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I'm from a little tiny town in Virginia called Gloucester. But I'll stop doing that. Is it making a lot of noise? So I decided to go live with my sister because, I'm 19 years old and I'm not wanting to live back with Dad. And so I go to live with my sister, who was married, and I get a job. And it's at this little home improvement company, and I'm working with a friend of mine. And it was a good job, but by this time I'm like 20. And what ends up happening there is everybody at this job loves to party. Everybody. We all love to party. And we start going out to the bars at, after work, and everybody comes in hungover, so it's not a big deal. I mean, we all come in, super haggard all the time, and nobody thought anything of it. I'm going and laying on the floor in the finance manager's office because I'm so hungover, and everybody's like, we laugh about all this stuff because, it's just kind of what we did. And so they partied like I like to party, but what ended up happening was I kind of I wanted to stay at the bar a little bit later than they did, so they would all leave at like 9, and I'd stick around until, midnight, and then the midnight people would leave, and I'd stick around till the 2 a.m. people, and then they'd leave, and so I'd go wherever the people that were going somewhere after the bar were going. I was going where they were going. And staying out all night, and sometimes showing up for work and sometimes not. And then it really had, at that point, it was getting to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm not going to drink tonight. I already started saying that to myself, like, when I get up in the morning and I go to work, I would be convinced, like utterly convinced. I would swear on my life that when I was sitting at my desk at work, I am not drinking tonight. I need to go to lunch, eat a lot of food, get the hangover to go away, and I'm not going out. I'm going to go to bed early tonight. And inevitably at 4 o'clock, the fog would lift. I would start to feel better and think that I overreacted a little bit, or at least say, okay, I'm going to go out and have a couple, or I'm going to go just go to this one place for a couple of drinks, and then I'll go home, and I'll go home early, and I'll go to bed. And it just never happened that way, ever. And I didn't understand why. I had no idea why I couldn't just go home. I had no idea why I couldn't just go home. Why did I have to go to the bar? And so I'm kind of having a little bit of inkling that my drinking's not normal, but I'm certainly not talking about it to anybody. And I'm trying to remember what. See, it's funny, whenever I come to talk, I always think in my mind, like, I don't even know what my story is. I'm going to blank out, and it's going to be horrible, and I just blank out. There it is. So I'm working at this job, and I'm going out every night, and I'm coming in, and I'm not coming in, and I'm lying to people, and it just sucked, it just sucked. But all the while, I was pretending that I was this successful little businesswoman, because I'm in my mid-20s, and my job was good. So even in spite of all that, I was getting promoted at this job, and I was doing a horrible job, but I was convincing them that I was doing a good job, and I was getting promoted, and so on the outside, everything looked like it was okay, I had the job, I had a car, I had a boyfriend, I had all these things, but inside, I just knew I needed to change. Something needed to change. Something was wrong with me, but I had no idea what it was, so I just kept drinking and kept going along, pretending like everything was okay to everybody, things just kept getting worse. They started to get worse. They started to get more noticeable. It started to get where I couldn't hide it from people outwardly. A lot of things were going on. Like I said, I like anything that makes me feel better, and I would feel better at all costs, and that starts to take a toll on my appearance, and I started to look a little thin, and I looked kind of sickly, and I had a little intervention with my sister and some friends of mine. I had a little intervention in my sister's house. I walk in, and they're all sitting around, and I don't remember what the guise was, what the pretense of me getting me there was, but I just remember walking in, and they're all kind of sitting around staring at me when I walk in. I'm like, what is going on here? And And of course it becomes, we're really worried about you. We think that you're drinking and partying too much. Maybe you should go to the hospital and get checked out. And I'm like, yeah, I think I do. And so I agreed to it. And I have some outside issues as well. And I was able to convince them that it was the outside issue and not the alcohol. Of course, it was never the alcohol. And that maybe I needed to go stay with my dad for a week, take a week vacation from work, and just go stay with Dad, not be around the people that I was hanging around, and just kind of get away from that and get better. And that didn't work, so I came back and got right back to the same thing. And I got my second DUI when I was 26. So all these years of drinking, I have no idea how I only got two. I don't know how I didn't kill somebody in a car accident, because there have been so many times where I would get home and wonder how in the world I got there, and look outside, where's the car, driving home, squinting one eye, that whole thing. It's like I have no idea how I lived and didn't kill somebody else. And I'm grateful for those DUIs now, because I could have killed somebody else. Even though the distance I was going on the second one wasn't very long until I got home. I was almost home. I was almost there. And even though that distance wasn't very long, it's long enough to hit somebody and kill them. And I hear stories like that all the time in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I am so grateful that that's not my story. But I got my second DUI when I was 26, and I thought, okay, this is 10 years later, so that probably doesn't indicate a big problem, but maybe I should start going back to therapy. That's probably what I need to do, is go figure out what some of my issues are, figure out, deal with my childhood stuff, and figure out some things. And so I started going back to this therapist that I had been to previously, but quit going, because that was my thing. I never... Like I said, I always started strong, but I never finished. I never finished anything in my life. I was hell out of the gate. But as soon as anything got hard, I'm done. And that was everything in my life, except Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank God. So I went back to my therapist, who I'd been before, and I don't remember when it was, or what the conversation was, or how it came up, or what, but she somehow knew about my drinking, and she somehow knew about my other things, and she looked me straight in the face this one day and said, there's absolutely nothing that I can do for you until you stop drinking. You need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember looking right at her and being, in my mind, going, there's no way in hell I'm going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and leaving her office and never going back. I never went and saw her again. Didn't go to AA, never went and saw her again. And, that was the first time anybody had ever really mentioned AA to me. And shortly thereafter, I was at work, and this girl that I worked with that I used to party with a lot, she partied like I did, she had gone away probably 6 months before to what I later learned was a little treatment stint. It was like a 2-week thing she had gone to, and she had come back. And she's been clean since then, which is really cool, clean and sober. And she still is. But she had gone to this treatment, and she had come into my office one day, and I remember her walking in with this binder and setting it on my desk and kind of pushing it across my desk. And I'm just like, what is this? And I open it up, and it's a page, and the first page, I see, 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and our lives became unmanageable. And I'm like, that's weird. Then I read 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And I'm like, okay, that sounds a little bit like God. And then step 3, turn it, whatever it is. Whatever it is. No, the step 3 where it actually says God. And as soon as I saw that, I closed that binder and I pushed it back across the desk, and I'm like, that's not going to be it. That's not going to be it. I got a lot of ideas about what my problem is and what my solution might be. I know what my solution is now, and it's alcohol, and I know what it might be, and I definitely know that it's not God. I knew that. We didn't go to church when I was growing up. We had gone very briefly for a period of time when I was really little, and my dad got really upset about something that happened in the church play, and he did. He got all mad and yanked us out of there, and we never went back. And and he's a self-proclaimed. He'll say he's an atheist. I don't believe it, but he's self-proclaimed atheist. And so we didn't grow up talking about God or spiritual stuff. And I remember going to church with my friends, my girlfriends, and feeling like, sticking out like a sore thumb and feeling so uncomfortable, not having a clue what they were talking about in Bible school, and feeling so uncomfortable, like I was the odd guy out, and I didn't fit in. And that was the thing. I never fit in anywhere. That was my problem. I never felt like I fit in. So we didn't have God in my house. And so when I saw that word, my mind snapped shut, and I was done with that. So Things got a little worse, so a little bit of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization had to happen. I had to continue, I had to get to that point where I was going to those sordid places like it talks about in the big book. So by day, I was this, 25-year-old little business girl that, worked in IT and had a little job. And then by night, between the hours of, 5 and 10, I'm an alcoholic. And then from 10 to 12, I'm a bad alcoholic. And then and I'm going to these sordid places. And I'm doing things that I thought that I'd never do. And those standards, and my parents taught me right from wrong. I hear that all the time. My parents taught me right from wrong. I knew, but I was incapable of doing anything different, because all I cared about was getting wasted. That's all I wanted. And the thing was that I could take one drink, and immediately I had to have more. And it was the weirdest thing, but I remember identifying that when I was drinking. So when I came in here and I read about that in the book with the sponsor about, we had this allergy to alcohol, that it's not the 18th drink, it's the first one, It's the first one that I take that sets off that reaction. And I know what that reaction is, I know it, where I just keep getting up and go, okay, I'm only have one more glass, and then getting back up, and then it's midnight, I'm going to the store and getting more. And, the insanity of that and the baffling part of that. But so things started getting worse, and I started, those standards that I'd always had, or that I thought that I had. You'd never know that I had standards by the way that I acted, but but those standards that I thought that I had, they just started going away. And that bar that I thought, that I would set of, I'll never go lower than that. That bar started getting lower and lower and lower, and eventually that bar was gone, and there was nothing that I hadn't done that I had said that I wouldn't. I had crossed every line that I said I would never cross, and I knew it was wrong, and I hated myself for it. And I wasn't telling anybody, I'm not honest with anybody about how I feel or what I'm doing. And so a friend of mine finds out who I'm hanging out with, a good friend of mine from high school who I'm eternally grateful for, and she's still in my life today, and she's back in my life today as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've gotten to make amends to her, and she was in my wedding a few months ago, and it's just awesome. But this one girlfriend of mine, she found out who I was hanging out with and what I was doing, and called my dad, and here comes Dad again, and thank God for my dad, So Dad comes and gets me, and they tell me I need to go to rehab, and I'm like, all right, well, let's go look at some places. I'll go with you guys to look at some places and kind of check these places out, see what's going on. And we go and we look at a few. The one that I said, oh no, I'm not going there. I have some sort of, oh, I'm not going to that one. That's the one I went to, and I ended up going to treatment. And it was a little place in Newport News, Virginia, and it was called Serenity House. And as soon as I walked in, I immediately identified that I was nothing like the people that were in there, because the people that were in there had gone to prison. And they had to, when they got out of prison, they had to come to Serenity House before they were able to be acclimated back into society. It was kind of like a stepping stone for them. And they had done all these other things that, the stuff, the standards that I had that went away then, there were even more that I hadn't quite yet done. And these people have done all that, and I haven't. And then I'm on a leave of absence from work to go to rehab, so I'm getting paid to be there. So of course that makes me different too. I'm like, well, I'm getting paid to be here. I'm this ego that I have, I'm so much better than these people, And so I quickly became group leader and. Tried to help everybody else with their problems. I was helping them because I was good at figuring out what was wrong with you and helping you figure your stuff out. But when we were in our little small groups and they would pass the feeling wheel around, and you had to identify what your feeling was, I was like, I had no idea. When they would pass me the feeling wheel, I couldn't identify what my feelings were. I had no idea. That was how screwed up I was. I really had no idea how I felt about anything. I was just numb and broken. And when I was in there, I need to hurry up. I always do this. We went to outside meetings, thank God, and if nothing else, because I drank in there. I drank NyQuil in the bathroom at an AA meeting one time because we were able to go to Walmart and somebody stole some NyQuil while we were there, and so we go to an AA meeting and we're in the bathroom swigging the NyQuil in the church bathroom, and but we went to outside meetings, and what I realized in those meetings was that I could relate. Like, I remember going to those meetings and being like, wow, I feel something in here. I didn't know it was called relating. I didn't know, that it was the power of Alcoholics Anonymous, the power of God, the power of sobriety. I didn't know it was all that stuff. I just knew that I felt something in those meetings that was really freaking cool. And I really felt like I fit in there, and I didn't really want to, I didn't really want to fit in there because I couldn't possibly be an alcoholic. So I get out of rehab, and while I was in there, I did get a little boyfriend, and that was a good distraction. And when I got out, 2 weeks later, he got kicked out, and I go pick him up. So as soon as I get out of rehab, I end up getting fired from my job that I, so egotistically had been getting paid to be in rehab for, because I didn't go back, and I get fired, and so I've lost my job, and I go pick up my little rehab buddy and my little rehab boyfriend, and what really ended up happening within a week, I was drinking. Within a week I was drinking, and by the end of the month after I got out of rehab, I really had done everything that I'd never said that I would do. And what they told me in rehab was go to meetings, get a sponsor, and they told me everything that I hear in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't do any of it. I did not one thing. I'm drunk in a week, that's how it goes. So things got bad again, and another concerned friend called Dad again, and it was one of those things. It was one of those nights. It wasn't the last night that I drank, but right before I moved down to Wilmington, I was there had been a hurricane up in Hurricane Isabel had hit in Virginia, and it had done pretty much a lot of damage where I lived, and so we didn't have any power. And my roommate at the time was staying with some friends, and me and rehab boyfriend were running the streets and going all over sordid places and staying in a hotel. He and I were holed up in a little hotel for about a week, and it was just gross. Just really gross, the gross stuff that we do. But this one night, for some reason, we were riding around, and we happened to ride past my apartment where I was living at the time, and I knew my roommate hadn't been there, but this night she was there. I saw her car, and then I saw the car of a couple other friends of mine. And in my mind, what happened that night when I saw her car over those cars, I thought that they were there because they were waiting for me. For some reason, my brain said, they're there for me, and I have to go back. The gig is up. It kind of clicked in my mind that the gig was up, and I had to go home. And of course, rehab boyfriend's like, no, we're not going there. And I'm like, I have to go there. And I go there, and I tell them what I've been doing, and they call my dad. And Dad came and got me the next day, and I can tell you some of the things that I said to my dad the next day are, it's like what we do to the people that we love. Ugh. He tried to save my life over and over and over again. And God, sorry. But the things that I said to him, thank God I'm able to make amends, and then I can go to her today. Because of Alcoholics Anonymous, you guys have taught me how to do that. So, Dad came and got me, and he took me to his house, and he's like, so you can either stay here. Here, I get this option again. You can stay here or go to your sister's. And I decided that I'm going to come down to Wilmington to stay with my sister. And because I had been to visit her, and I really liked it in Wilmington. And I was sure as I wanted to go on to live with my dad. And so I came down to Wilmington, and I started going to meetings, and I started going to outpatient rehab, because I'd just been in inpatient rehab like a month before. So they said, go to outpatient. I'm going to outpatient, and I'm drinking, and I'm going to meetings, and I'm drinking, and I get a sponsor, and I'm drinking, and I'm lying about it. And, I'm going to meetings every day. I don't have a license at this point. My second DUI had come through, so the car was gone, the license was gone. I don't have a job, and I'm living with my sister, and I'm sleeping in my niece's big girl bed, which is 2. And, and they're letting me take the car to the convenience store because they're idiots, but I'm just kidding. Because they didn't know what I I was doing. They'd let me take the car to the convenience store to get cigarettes, which the convenience store was right next to the liquor store. So I'd run into the liquor store and get as many little bottles as I could drink on the way back to the house and throw those out, drink them and throw them out the window, and airplane bottles, and whatever size bottle I could fit in my purse. And I'd take that back to the house, and I was hiding vodka in my 2-year-old niece's closet, and I'm stashing bottles out in the bushes beside the garage so that when I went out and smoked, I could swig down and nobody would know. And, I'm doing this and going to meetings. And, man, there's something about that that, I had a full knowledge. And that was the thing, too. By this point, I've been through rehab. I've been going to AA meetings for a little while, and I'd heard everything that you guys had said. And, the realization that I was an alcoholic had set in. I was kind of knowing it, but I couldn't stop. I just couldn't stop, and I knew the consequences of it, And I was under these conditions of staying with my sister that if I drank and didn't go to meetings, and if I drank, then I couldn't stay there. And I knew all these things full on, but yet I was drinking anyway. And so that goes on for about 4 months, and in January of 2004, January 18th of 2004, as a matter of fact, my then sponsor had probably 15 sponsees. It was ridiculous. But she had a ton of sponsees. She helps everybody. She decided for this year, for her anniversary, her AA anniversary, she was going to have a brunch with all of her sponsee women. And it was going to be on this Sunday, January 18th. And, a couple days prior to that was January 16th, and that was the last time I had a drink. And that was, I swigged some vodka before going to my sponsor's house to help her clean for an AA party she was going to have at her house that night. I didn't know that was going to be the last time I drank, or I would have done a lot more. I would have drank a lot more. I mean, I really didn't have much vodka, not even enough for her to smell it, And I'm like, God. So that was on January 16th, and then 2 days later was this brunch with these women, and we go to this other woman's house, and we have this brunch, and on the way to the meeting, she tells me that the topic of we're going to have this meeting while we're at the brunch, and the topic of the meeting, sorry, I have something on my teeth. I'm sorry. But the topic of this meeting is going to be, what spiritual principle have you practiced the most over the course of the past year? And I'm like, oh, God, And, of course, everyone's going to have to share. I'm like, oh, God, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? So I'm trying to think of all these things that I could say, and think of things that I've heard in meetings that maybe I could throw out there that would sound really good. And we get to this, we're having this brunch, and we're going around the table, and they get to me, and all I know is that I had drank 2 days prior, and that before that I had just picked up another white chip, and before that I was supposed to have picked up 30 days, or I thought that everybody thought I was supposed to be picking up 30 days, and I'm picking up white chips, so there's, all I can think of in my mind is that, all this time I'm going to AA, and I'm drinking, and I'm lying, and it comes to me, and the only thing that I could say was, I drank again, and I can't stop. And I start crying, and those women surrounded me. They were on it. They surrounded me immediately. And, that's what I get in Alcoholics Anonymous, what I continue to get to this day, is when I'm honest and when I ask for help, or when I'm having any kind of struggle, the women in Alcoholics Anonymous surround me so that even if I wanted to run away, I couldn't, And those women surrounded me and told me it was going to be okay and that I could do it. And that was on a Sunday, and the next day was our home group on a Monday night, and we went to our home group, and the first round of white chips goes around, and I don't pick it up because I'm terrified, because I picked up so many. I'm like, oh, God. And, and every time I picked up a white chip, it chinked away. I'm so grateful for all the times that I did have to drink, and I believe every drink gets us to where we are, and that's what I had to do. But every time it would hurt a little more, and it would get a little deeper, And this last time, it went around the first time, and I'm like, oh God, I don't want to do it. And I look over at my sponsor, and she's looking at me, So the second round, I have to pick it up, and that was going to be my last white chip, and I didn't know it. So that night after the meeting, we all went out to eat, which we like to do, and after we went out to eat, everybody's tired and wants to go home, but for some reason, I just knew that if I left that group of people that we'd been to dinner with, I knew if I left that place and went back to my sister's house, that I was going to stop at the little convenience store on the way back, because that's what I always did. At this point, I had my license back. It's a long story. But I knew that I was going to stop at that convenience store and drink. I just knew it, because that's what I always did. And I didn't want to do it, and so I asked my sponsor if she would hang out with me that night. And she was tired, and she had just had a brunch for 80 women, and she was tired, and she didn't feel like it. But she said, "I'd love to." I mean, she didn't, because that's what we do, and that's what I learned from her, and was that even when we don't feel like it, we do it anyway, and that's what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And she didn't feel like hanging out with me, but so we ended up leaving, and on the way back to her house, she realized that she had not yet seen a man that she was really close with, who was dying of cancer, and he was in hospice, and she was like his surrogate daughter, and she realized she had not yet gone and seen him that day, and so she asked me if I would go to hospice with her to visit him, and I'm like, sure. So we get there, and I remember walking in, and his two daughters were there, his two biological daughters from out of town were there, and he was laying in the bed, and his breathing was really visibly distressed. You could see that he was visibly in distress, and his two daughters were sitting beside him, and they were holding his hand. And so we walk in, and my sponsor sits down, and she sits on one end of the bed and kind of touches his leg, and I sit on the other side, and they were all touching him, like they were connected, and for some reason I felt like I needed to too, and so I did, and we sat there, and he was a devout Catholic, and my sponsor at the time, she had converted to Catholicism, and I think his children were too, but they started praying, and they started praying the rosary. And I'd never heard the rosary prayer before, but it's actually beautiful. But I'd never heard it before, and I'm not a fan of prayer. I'm not a fan of God. And I'm sitting in this room, and these women start praying, and they're praying in unison. So they start praying together, and it was kind of like a chant, but not in a weird way, in a really beautiful way. And I can hear them. They're praying, and they're holding his hand, and they're touching his leg. And as they're praying, I'm watching him, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I'm soaking this all in, and I hear them praying, and I'm watching him. I hear them praying, and I'm watching him. And as they're praying, his breathing becomes less and less labored. He starts calming down, and they're praying, and he's calming down, and they're praying, and he's calming down. And I don't know at what point that I realized it was going to happen, but I remember looking down, and he had stopped breathing. And it was like a tangible thing, like I could feel it in the room. Not like I could, I could just feel the love is what that's how I liken it to, that's what I think, how I identify it now. And I didn't know it at that moment. I didn't know it when I was sitting in that room. I didn't know it when I left and went to my sponsor's house that night. But I felt something in that room. And my immediate next thought was, why am I here in this room with this man? Now, this man had 30-some years sober. He'd helped a ton of people all over the country. He was a wonderful member of Alcoholics Anonymous and helped everybody. I barely knew him, and I'm a lying little drunk who cannot stay sober. Why am I here? Why isn't so-and-so here? Why isn't so-and-so here is what I'm thinking. And I didn't realize it that night, and I didn't necessarily realize it the next day, but the realization came was that, and I'm sure my sponsor probably told me, but, that man loved Alcoholics Anonymous so much that he was literally practicing the 12-step until the second he died, like literally. And I think about that, and I'm like, God, I want to go out like that. And that guy, I would see him, and like I said, I didn't know him very well, and God, I wish I did. I wish I had. I really wish that I had gotten to know him and been able to have been sober sooner. But, man, the gift that he gave me is just unbelievable, and all I can hope to do is kind of pay that back, I forgot what I was going to say. So, I didn't leave that room that night and go skipping off to church. I didn't leave, the next day and go running, hand in hand with God. But what I did do was I stayed at my sponsor's house that night, and we talked about recovery. And I went to a meeting with her the next day. And I stayed at her house again the next night, and we talked about recovery. And I went to a meeting with her the next day. And I did that over and over and over again. And I did the action that it took to stay sober. I became willing to do that stuff, and she likes to say, but so I stayed at her house that night. I stayed the next night. I stayed the next night. I wouldn't leave. 4 months later, she's asking me to pay rent because I was terrified. I knew I had something had happened that I wanted to hold on to, and I did not want to let it go. And so I started going to meetings all the time, and I started working the steps, and I worked the steps with her, and we read through the big book together. And and since then, I've been able to come to my own conception of a higher power. It was there that night. It was absolutely there that night. My God, he has to hit me over the forehead with a 4x4 sometimes to get me to see what's really going on. It takes a lot for me sometimes. So, I needed that. And so I got to stay sober, and I got to work the steps, and man, now I get to help other women stay sober, and that is absolutely amazing. I've got a lot of sponsees right now, which is really cool, because right before I got married, and I got married, my God, all the things that have happened in my life since I got sober, I've got relationships back with the people that I truly cared about and had pushed as far away as possible. I've been able to make amends to these people, and I have these treasured relationships with my family and my friends back, and it's utterly amazing. And that's probably the best gift that I've gotten in sobriety, is the relationships that I have with other people, because that was the root of my problem, right? I had this inability to form a true partnership with another human being, and I can do that today, and I just love that. But yeah, so I through going to Alcoholics Anonymous, I learned to suit up and show up, so I'm able to do that in my job. And I get a job, and I become a good employee, and I go to work every day. And I wake up one time, I remember when I first got my job, and it was a little job, and I got this job, and I wake up late, because I just got it, and I'm used to sleeping late. And I overslept, and I'm freaking out, and I'm living with my sponsor at the time. And I go running into her room, and I'm like, do I need to tell them that I'm sober, that I'm not late because I was out drinking all night last night, and that I really am sober? And she's just like, what are you talking about? You tell them you overslept, And, but so I didn't, and, so I learned to be a good employee, and I kept that job, and then I got another job, and then I went back to school, and, I've graduated school, and, all those things that I had started but quit, all those things that I could never follow through with, I learned by coming to Alcoholics Anonymous how to follow through. And I'm just so grateful. And, all those things that I thought, that happens for other people. That stuff doesn't happen for me. That's stuff that other people do. They go to school, and they get degrees, and they get married, and they have big girl jobs. And, I don't deserve any of that stuff. And that stuff doesn't happen for me. And it's all happened, And no matter what, I don't have to drink. It's been a long time since I've thought about a drink, The only time I really think about a drink sometimes is when I walk in a store and they've got something new, and I'm like, dang, they didn't have that when I was drinking. But it's not as serious, though. It's more, but it's like, dang. And my God, what a miracle that is, I couldn't not drink for a day. And I haven't thought about it in years, and it's amazing, and it's a beautiful thing, but it's not me. It's not something that I did. It's not because I'm great. It's because I came in here and I listened to you guys who had done the stuff that you suggested that I do, and then I did it, and it works, And, man, what I believe today is that Alcoholics Anonymous works 100% of the time. I believe that to my core. I know that if it can work for me, it can work for anybody else, and you hear that all the time, but it's true. I'm like, no, really, really, if it can work for me, it can work for you too, and it really is the easier, softer way. Even when it's hard, and even when stuff doesn't go my way, a lot of times, but God, it's so much better than it was. It's so much better than it was, and I'm just so grateful, and I've got all these tools today, so I'm going to go ahead and stop because I need to. So I could go on and on and on because I just love AA and I love being sober. And y'all just keep coming back because seriously, if you're struggling, man, the only thing I did right, literally the only thing I did right for those months when I was struggling, and I just kept coming. No matter what, I just kept coming to meetings. I came drunk, I came not drunk, I just kept coming to meetings. So just keep coming back if you're struggling. Thanks for letting me share.